Like millions of people around the world, I love violent games. Now, I guess you could say that I haven't had the most traditional, girly upbringing. I had sliced my way through Jafar's evil henchmen to find the princess long before reading Arabian Nights. And I had fought Nazis in Wolfenstein 3D before I even knew what war was. Now, I think violence in games is a contentious term because I've never really seen any of these games as violent. Instead, they had goals which needed to be achieved through whatever creative ways I could come up with. But traditional conservative media love to report about the controversial aspects of video games, especially those with violent and sexualized content. But personally, there's nothing I like better after a hard day than virtually kicking someone's butt using a myriad of creative arsenal. And my favorite game in which to do this is Quake. Quake is a first-person shooter game where human opponents meet each other in a deathmatch setting. And I guess that some of you might be somewhat surprised to hear me say this, since not many females are really willing to admit such boisterous pleasures. But also, before I continue, I think that it's important to define the types of games that I'm talking about, since some of you also may be sitting there thinking, that's a load of rubbish. Girls do play games, I know lots. Well, the games that I'm talking about are competitive, reaction-intensive, and they feature some combative elements. They're not as simple or as accessible as other games, and you definitely can't just play them on your phone while sitting on the train. So from now on, when I'm talking about video games, these specific games are the ones that I'm going to be referring to. And since starting multiplayer gaming back in 1999, I've been lucky enough to turn this hobby of mine into a profession. So I've spent many years traveling the world competing in different tournaments and expositions. And this also means that I've received a monthly paycheck or sponsorship for playing games like Unreal Tournament, Quake, and Dead or Alive. I could even get a nice bonus of prize money if I placed well in different tournaments. And at one of these tournaments in particular, CeBIT, a journalist from a popular German tabloid beckoned to me. And he asked me if they could take my picture, since they didn't often see people like me at gaming events. And at first I was a little bit taken aback because I thought, what is he talking about? I mean, is he being racist or something? But looking around, I saw what he meant. Aside from the promotional models, it was essentially a sausage fest. Modern-day poet, Flo Rida, he put it best when he asked, where are them girls at? Or, in a more serious note, why do so few females enjoy playing competitive combat games? In my experience, the audiences for these games has been predominantly male, which might be why the editor of the tabloid chose to use my image as the largest one in an article about a tournament which I wasn't even competing in. It's a little ridiculous. So when thinking about the lack of female players in my favorite games, I came across many studies showing gender preferences for certain types of toys. Now, toy preferences are one of the earliest known manifestations of sex-linked social behavior. And like gaming, toys provide an arena in which to act out different scenarios and roles. These studies showed that at about the age of 18 months, babies would start showing that dolls were more feminine and wheeled toys were more masculine. And interestingly, these preferences weren't only human. Similar experiments run on rhesus and vervet monkeys produced the same results. Male monkeys wanted to play with the wheeled toys, whereas female monkeys would tend to gravitate towards the dolls and the pods. So these studies actually show that there may be some biological preparedness for masculine or feminine gender roles. And taking a deterministic point of view, this would essentially argue that our interests are hardwired. In fact, these genderized perceptions are so deeply ingrained that it can be quite problematic when interacting in an online multiplayer environment. And I noticed that quite often there's pretty much two ways in which a female player can be received. And the first is adoration. People will shower me with compliments and marriage proposals for some reason. And the second is degradation, where people will wonder, how did I get a computer in the kitchen? Or they'll make really lewd comments about, really sexual comments about various body parts, or they'll tell me that I'm sucking so hard at this game that I should be sucking something else. And these polarized reactions, although funny, I mean, they can be really annoying, and they can act as a roadblock to participation in gaming communities. And I know that many other female players do share the same sentiment. And because of this, I think that we really need to take a look at how we behave online. And a lot of people have asked me how I deal with these crazy reactions. And aside from just laughing it off, the easiest way to deal with it is just to remember that at one point we were all young and we didn't have as much cognitive control. In 2003, I joined an international all-female gaming team. In 2006, we were lucky enough to make our dream come true, and 4 of us moved to live in a gaming house together in Sweden. And this meant that our lives were essentially dedicated to practicing, competing in, and exhibiting certain types of games while traveling the world. We also went to many places like the US, Spain, Russia, France, Germany, South Africa. The list is quite long. So essentially, our job was just to play games, which was really cool and really a lot of fun. But research notes that this kind of competitive behavior is actually a masculine trait. And that's interesting because we were a group of girls living together doing something quite masculine, whereas we all saw each other as quite feminine. And I think that there's too much focus on things surrounding these games like masculinity and competitiveness and violence, when it kind of overshadows one of the most important factors when it comes to playing these games, and that's team play. And if you look at this image, some of you may just see like gore and violence and blood, but what I see is 2 people working together to survive. And studies show that females seek meaningful social interaction in games. And many games have the objective of working together to achieve a common goal as their lifeblood. So team play is a great expression of meaningful social interaction. And like I said before, I spent many years in an all-female team, and even a decade or more than a decade on, I still think of these girls like my sisters. But I've also forged lifelong friendships with male teammates and competitors. We've got this unique bond that is developed over countless hours of playing together or even competing against one another. We're united by the charm of sharing similar goals in a common virtual space, yet simultaneously needing to appreciate and understand our differences. I mean, where else could a mathematics professor, a heavy metal guitarist, and a pilot find common ground? It's all in gaming. But unfortunately, games like first-person shooters, they've got a serious image problem. There's so much focus on all the negative aspects that there's nothing to speak about the positive. And I think that's really wrong. I think that we need to really look at games in a different light and see that team play is a necessity for enjoyment, participation, and learning in many of these games. The downside is that many of these games are marketed exclusively to males. And another common outcome of playing these games is actually computer literacy. So if these games are being marketed to males, then males in general are just more likely to become computer literate since games are providing them with an easy entrance. Arguably, casual games, which are more popular amongst females, they don't offer the same opportunities for developing more advanced skills like programming, networking, and hardware engineering. So in this sense, just by picking the games that they do, females are getting the short end of the stick. All in all, games really need to shed these negative stereotypes. They're able to develop skills and confidence in digital technologies, which can lead to an increased interest in careers in computer science and other technical areas. They're also able to teach teamwork and forge really meaningful friendships. So I'm not telling the games industry to change their games, because I like them the way that they are. And I'm not saying that gaming can build a virtual, egalitarian utopia. But what I am saying is, you should really try to look at games in a different light. And don't let your gender pigeonhole you into selecting socially inappropriate interests. Don't be fooled by images like this that only show the most superficial aspects of games. The social stigma that surrounds many games is superfluous and unnecessary. And I really hope that now you'll be able to look at games just with a different eye, so that you'll be open to creating the same positive experiences. Thank you.